the Smart Buildings Academy podcast with Phil Zito, episode 510. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. In this episode, we are going to be doing a deep dive on how to measure the ROI of building automation training. For a lot of you, budgets are coming up, or you're going to be starting budgeting very soon. And one of the biggest challenges is being able to quantitatively define and explain and justify any investments you make in training. We can easily talk about the soft benefits, increased retention, increased employee engagement, things like that. But there are some numbers, and it's actually surprisingly not that difficult to define the ROI of training, and this will really help you justify the training allocations in your budget. As always, if I can speak, as always, everything will be available in podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/510. Once again, that is podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/510. It's been a while since I've done an episode. I got to get that sharpness down again. Okay, so imagine this, right? You just spent $50,000 training your BAS team. So you've put maybe 20 people through training over the course of a year. And everyone's excited, people are happy. These, senior techs who haven't ever gotten training, they're like, finally, I got training. This is great. And then 3 months later, the CFO comes up to you, director of finance comes up to you and says, what did we actually get for that $50,000? Now, you could talk about morale being up. You could talk about everyone's excited. You've got engagement from the team. It feels great. But if you can't answer that with numbers, guess what is going to get cut from next year's budget? Yes, training, because if you can't put an ROI on it, and this becomes especially true the bigger you get in organizational size, you're going to find that things without an ROI attached to them get cut out of the budget. So, in this episode, we're going to be talking about how do we give you the ability to create quantitative numbers, ROIs. How do you set up systems so that you can justify training? You can ensure that it's delivering results. How do we do all that? So by the end of this episode, you're going to have a step-by-step framework. You'll be able to measure ROI. You'll be able to calculate it in dollars, and you'll be able to use it and justify, or use it to justify rather, and hopefully grow your budget when it comes to training, because we all know people need to be trained. Our business wouldn't exist if that wasn't true. I will say another side benefit out of this, and I know I've been beating this drum. If you've listened to like any of my earlier episodes, I've said, let's get some actual labor costs. Let's get some logging of your proficiency on projects. Let's really start to dial in what it costs to do whatever it is you do, and let's quantitatively measure that. You're going to have some ideas around that as well. All right, so what's the problem with training in specifically when it comes to ROI and building automation? Give me a second. I'm going to take a sip of coffee. It's Sunday morning, and my graphics card decided to melt down, so I'm doing this so if the video looks any different. I'm doing this actually on a webcam on my laptop with, you can't really see it, but there's wires everywhere, so if the setup doesn't look the same, that's why. So usually whenever training comes about, it comes about because of some need. We're getting more callbacks than normal. We're not retaining our people. Our people can't go out and execute work. They just can't do what they need to do. We've got retention issues. And while those things are real from a day-to-day perspective, they're very difficult to quantify. They're very difficult when I, as a CEO, have $100,000 I can spend. I'm going to wonder, if I spend that $100,000, am I going to get a return on that $100,000? And in some cases, your return may be even. In some cases, you might not get a return. But there's a variety of reasons why you would make a decision to do an investment. But when it comes to training historically as an organization, or as an industry, we have not been good at going and really defining what an ROI is. Leaders tend to struggle with doing this because, one, they don't track baseline performance. I know this is where I get on my soapbox and I say, if you're not tracking your project efficiency by full time equivalent by FTE, if you're not tracking callbacks, if you're not tracking slippage, if you're not tracking by project tasks, you're not running your business right, in my humble opinion. Now, I know there's some of you who are listening who are like, Phil, who are you? I've built a 9-figure business and we don't do any of that. And, kudos. Yeah, you probably have. But how much more efficient would you be if you could cut 1 to 3% of inefficiency out of a 9-figure business? That becomes a lot of profit. And I don't know about you, but profit's a good thing because it's what actually makes all the wonderful joys of running a business worth it. Um, I'm not even going to get into tax law and all that jazz. But in all seriousness, if you don't track your baseline performance before training, you're going to have no way to compare. You're going to have no way to go and really understand, did we improve or did we not? And unfortunately, or fortunately, in the world of building automation, we exist behind the eight ball. We're behind the curve from the moment we start, right? Because we've got skilled labor shortages, we've got a lot of technical complexity. Building automation is the only skilled trade that I know of. Forgive my ignorance. I'm sure those of you are going to educate me that there are many more. But it's the only one that I know of that you have to understand electrical. You got to understand IT. You got to understand HVAC. You got to understand building automation. You got to understand building design, psychrometrics, thermodynamics, all these complex sciences and knowledge sets come in. And it makes it very complex. It's not just teaching someone a tool, there's so many underlying skill sets. And the other thing is, how many of you are sitting on a massive backlog right now that you can't reliably execute? You're literally just putting bodies on a job site for contractual reasons, but those bodies aren't producing profit. Or you can't even put bodies on a job site. Or literally, your customers have to call you complaining multiple times before you'll send a service tech out because you just don't have the capacity. So that slippage, downtime, inability to staff work, um, that all has a cost, and the ROI can be massive, but only if you measure it. So, for example, let's talk on the owner side real quick. An owner we worked with. This was a major hospital. They had a in-house technician who. This technician was basically trained in control sequence fundamentals, troubleshooting, and as well as I think PID loop tuning. And they were able because they measured this because they had to go and log time. I think they're using like Maximo or something, and they're logging the time they would do on service calls, and they were able to trim on average 2 hours every time the operating room went down. Basically, they were able to resolve it 2 hours faster. Now, an operating room, just like an imaging room in a hospital, if that goes down, that's thousands of dollars per hour. It's kind of similar to like data centers. I used to do this one AT&T data center that had the American Idol, like you'd call in to vote thing. And I think that was like $1 million a minute. It was some crazy amount of money if that system went down. So when these systems go down, these critical systems, there is a huge cost. So simply going and being able to reduce 2 hours, that's $2,000 to $5,000, and that for a 2 hour period. An average training program around $1,000 to $3,000. You basically pay for the training program the first time you're able to be faster with OR troubleshooting. I mean, it's really that simple. We'll get into some more complex examples. We'll talk through some equations, some formulas, but it really is not that complicated. All right. So, how does this all come together? Let's define some key terms. So you've heard me say ROI. Forgive me. Once again, I live in Arizona, super dry, sucks, but it is what it is. So, return on investment, right? Return is, in our case, a measurable financial impact. So, this may be increased efficiency, so reduced slippage, more work done for the same amount of time. Cost reductions, this may be new revenue capabilities, your ability to staff up different types of work, more complex work, as well as avoided risk, potential failures, additional truck rolls, things like that. So when you hear return, this is really important. I don't want you to think retention. I don't want you to think happier employees. I mean, that's all important. Do not misunderstand that is important. But if we're trying to make a financial business case for training, we need to focus on financial impacts, things that can be quantitatively defined in a before state and an after state. I'm going to say that again because it's really important. Things that can be quantitatively defined in a before state and an after state. Our efficiency was 85% utilization. And I know utilization is not efficiency. It's not the same thing. You could be fully utilized and completely inefficient, but just go with me on this. So before we were 85% utilization, and now we're 87% utilization. But you can only measure that if you measure the before and measure the after. Investment, quite frankly, is cost of training. Now, I want to get clear in cost of training. It's something we as a training organization try to be pretty upfront about, but I find people don't necessarily factor this in. It's not just the course costs, it's also the wages for time spent training, it's any travel, any food, any lodging, so all of those expenses. So you need to factor that all in. All right. Now, let's define some examples of ROI categories a little bit deeper, right? So, efficiency gains, faster diagnoses and fixes, mechanics being able to roll out to a controls troubleshooting call and initially determine its controls and maybe do some level one fixes themselves, maybe clear some overrides, maybe do some resets, etc. Fewer callbacks, people being able to go out, do work, and it work, right? Not having to go back and fix it and go back and fix it and go. We've all been on those construction projects where it took longer to fix the stuff than it actually did to do the initial install and execution of the project. Cost savings, reductions in overtime. You know, if you get more efficient, you're going to do less overtime potentially. Lower contractor reliance. This is more for the owners. This is a big one. Why a lot of public universities and hospitals are training with us right now is they simply can't get contractors on site. They can't do things like keep their core systems up. Because of that, they are choosing to go and train. Revenue increase, more pull through work, risk avoidance, preventing downtime, compliance failures, especially in like FDA, USDA, JCO, and the Joint Commission in the case of healthcare, things like that. So, give you a real world example, kind of building this all together. If a tech, right, reduced troubleshooting by 1 hour on 200 service calls per year at $100 an hour. So, go with me. So, our numbers so far 1 hour reduction on 200 service calls at $100 an hour. That's $20,000 in annual savings. Now think back, and you're like, oh, that's a bunch of bull. Da, 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 da. I just want you. Let's put on our realism caps. This is you and I here. We're being honest with each other. How many of you who are managers have at least once a week someone calling you yet again about the exact same backnet integration to that chiller or to that rooftop because they made a mistake, they didn't understand it, they followed the steps you gave them, but they didn't understand why they were doing the steps. And so when they went from that train chiller to, you know, that York chiller, all of a sudden it didn't work. Even though it was the same core concepts, they couldn't get it to work. Now extrapolate that across the entire service team, across a year, multiple years, you can start to see some real savings. It's so freaking dry. Eventually, someone's just going to like send me a humidifier. They're going to get so tired of this. They're going to say, Phil, this is pathetic. Since you won't buy a humidifier for yourself, we're going to do it for you. But alas, I shall suffer for you. All right. Framework for measuring the ROI of BAS training. All right, so here's where we're going to get real specific. So we're going to start with step one, defining pre-training baselines. We're going to go to step two, identifying target metrics training will influence. So, like, what are we going to change? Step three, we're going to quantify the financial impact. Step four, we're going to calculate the ROI formula. Step five, we're going to do our post training measurement. And then we're going to put this all together in a budgeting approach. Bear with me here. This like dry throat is killing me. Man, I swear, I chug water. I don't know. It's probably the mini split that is in my office that like dries this air out. But otherwise, this office gets super hot with all the electronics in it. So it is what it is. All right, let's dive in. Step one, define the pre training baselines. Okay, so the first thing we want to do is we want to collect our before training data. So, if you're training your service techs, maybe average troubleshooting time per service call. If you're doing construction techs, maybe percentage of jobs with rework. If this is average people, maybe it's overtime hours. Maybe you're trying to get more efficient, reduce overtime. Pull through capture rate. Maybe you're trying to grow your service business. In the case of owners, operators, maybe energy costs tied to poorly tuned systems. Basically, if you don't know where you're starting, you can't prove you moved. That should be like your mantra. If I don't know where I started, can't prove you moved. Because if you don't know that you started at 50% of your jobs requiring rework and you've dropped it to 20%, then yeah, it's 20%, but you didn't know you started at 50, and that's a huge number. So, step two, right? Now we're going to identify our metrics. We want to pick 1 to 3 metrics most connected to the training topic. Let me give you an example. Let's say you go and you send all your people to Niagara TCP training or Johnson Controls PCT training for the programming tool, or maybe you send to Icon View Builder training for automated logic. Well, let's say you did that. And let's say this was your construction team. Probably don't want to measure service call efficiency or truck rolls related to service calls. That metric has nothing to do with what you just did. So we really want to connect to our topic. So let me give you an example again. Send someone to maybe a Smart Buildings Academy Control Sequence Fundamentals course to teach them how HVAC sequences work. And you're sending your service team. Well, then it would make sense to look at your number of truck rolls. It would make sense to look at time to resolve issues. How long does it take you to resolve an issue? It would make sense to look at potential pull through because if they understand sequences and if you understand how something's supposed to perform, you could see opportunities where it's not performing. You know, a couple others would be like a controls programming training, reducing rework, troubleshooting training, like I said, cutting downtime and overtime, energy optimization training, right? Reducing utility spend. Now, here's the thing, you don't want to try to measure everything, measure as close as you can to the training that you're doing. Once again, one of the kind of like easy buttons is if you're sending your construction team to do programming training, then measure their programming task efficiency. My gosh, stupid cough. Swear, folks, I'm sacrificing my lungs for you because I care about you. There you go. All right, step 3, quantify the financial impact. Sorry. I tried to say that with a straight face. So, quantify the financial impact. Now we want to translate our performance improvements into dollars. So, how do we do this? Let me give you a couple basic calculations here. Number one, labor savings. Hours saved, this is where you want to write stuff down, times hourly rate times frequency. So if you save 2 hours, and it's $100 an hour, that's $200. And you do this once a week, 52 weeks, right? So $200 times 52. I'm not a math whiz, but I think that's like $10,000. So if you only paid 4 grand for that course, I mean, that's a crazy ROI. Reduced rework. And the beautiful thing about these training efficiency ROIs is they persist past year one. So year 2, 3, 4, as long as that employee stays employed, you're going to see that same efficiency. So that's pretty cool. Reduced rework, cost of rework times the percentage of reduction. Increased revenue, extra jobs closed times average margin. Risk avoidance, estimated downtime times probability avoided. So let's talk through, right? We've got a training cost, it's $25,000. Course plus labor hours. Let's say this is like 10 people, $2,500 a person. The average troubleshooting time drops from 3 hours to 2. Team does 500 calls a year, 500 hours times $100, $50,000 of labor savings. Add $10,000 in new pull-through sales just because, they're more efficient. Now they can see more opportunities. They get you some pull-through. We get a return of $60,000. Now we're going to do our ROI equation. Write this down. Actually, hold to write it down because I'll get to it in the next step we go through. But basically what it is 60,000, so that's the total return, minus the cost, that's 25,000, divided by the cost of 25,000 times 100, 140% ROI. Very compelling case to do the training. Now, I know you're like, but Phil, we only know the ROI after the training. Yes, that is the unfortunate thing about training is you can model this out. You can say, I believe we're going to do this. And over time, you'll get more accurate. We've gotten to the point where we've gotten pretty good at being able to tell an organization, hey, if you increase this capability or reduce this, you're going to get this result. Just because we've worked with so many orgs, you'll get that as you start to track this. You'll start to learn how your business works. Step 4, calculate the formula for ROI. It's real simple. ROI equals, in brackets, net benefit minus training cost outside the brackets divided by training cost times 100. So you got to remember your PEMDAS here, right? Parentheses, all that stuff. I remember the acronym. I just don't remember which each one of them means. Parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, addition, subtract. Did I get it right? Let me know in the chat if I got it right or not. But I do know parentheses comes first, so net benefit minus training cost, and then division comes after that. So we're going to take that result divided by training cost times 100. Your CFOs and COOs and CEOs, they live in these formulas. So this is how you want to present your training. And then the most important is your post-training measurement. So you're going to want to track this at, the 30, 90, 180 day range. You're going to want to compare it against the baseline, report regularly to leadership. ROI is not one and done. It is over a time period because you're probably not going to recognize the ROI in the first 30 days. You might. I mean, your team might be really untrained. And you might see results really fast. In our experience, the results tend to come at the 3 and 6 year. 3 and 6 year. Oh my God, no one would train if. Wow. Alrighty then. They tend to come at the 3 and 6 month mark. If it was 3 and 6 years, I don't think our business would exist. But 3 and 6 month mark is when most people tend to see the ROI. Why do you think that is? Like, put on your thinking caps for a second and think, why would we see it typically in the 90 to 180 day? And why on the service side will we tend to see it in the 30 to 90 day? So construction's 90 to 180, service is 30 to 90. If you're thinking because most construction projects take 90 to 180 days to complete when we engage, you'd be absolutely right. And if you think of service and retrofit, those tend to be 30 to 90 days. You'd be absolutely right. That's why you tend to see ROI faster on the service side And the cool thing about training your service team is they tend to be the most expensive people. And then you tend to see it a little bit slower, but still pretty fast on the construction side of things. All right. So let's kind of shift this back. So, how do we go and really like communicate to our executive team the ROI budgeting? Well, first, we want to reframe training as not a cost center, but a profit center. For every dollar you put into training, you're looking for a 1.5 to 3x return. 1.5 to 3x return. Normal average is right around 2x, but you're looking for somewhere from a 1.5 to 3x. If you're getting below a 1x return, there are some situations where that makes sense. You have to have some sort of certificate to do a job, etc. But most of the time I would not make an investment if I'm going to see less than a 1.5, but I really am aiming for that 2 and ideally that 3x return. So for every dollar invested, you simply put, you want to get about $3 back. So how do you do this? Well, let's talk about an example. If 5 techs yielded 50,000 in savings, then 15 techs could yield 150, all things being equal. Now, I know things might look a little different. Obviously, they may be doing different work, have different capabilities, but you can get some pretty good back of napkin numbers by just doing projections. And if you have a trusted history, and this is why it's so freaking important for you to go and measure your data, measure your performance, start measuring it today. Like, stop what you're doing, pause the video, please come back to it. Helps the algorithm. But pause the video and go and actually measure your performance. Like, just simply set up how many techs do we have in a job? What is our revenue per FTE? What's our margin per FTE? How many hours are we spending versus how many hours are we budgeting? What's our time to resolution on calls? Do we classify our calls level 1, 2, and 3? On level 1s, what is our minimum time? What is our maximum? All those things. Like, start to measure this so that as you go and you create your ROI business cases, you have your pre-metrics and then start to really create that. I like to call it my Rolodex of proof. So you can go to that Rolodex. This is probably way too old of a reference for some of you younger folks. Rolodex used to be where you kept business cards from people so that you knew their contact info, so that you could easily contact them. It's way before the days of LinkedIn and cell phones. But your Rolodex of business. So you're going to go and you're going to say, or Rolodex of ROI rather. You're going to go and say, hey, remember when we did this training and it gave us this ROI? We can do the exact same thing. Those proof sources are going to be invaluable. All right, folks. So at the end of the day, it's important to have an ROI. It's probably the most important thing in business is to have an ROI. Because if you're not getting a return on an investment, or if you don't know what your return on your investment is going to be, you're just making blind guesses as you go about doing business. You're just guessing what you think the return of any investment are going to be. And I've been guilty of that myself. Because sometimes, honestly, it's freaking hard. And you got to swag and you got to guess, especially when you're getting started at this and you have no history of doing training. I recognize that it's going to be difficult for you to come up with a baseline. So, like we said, let's go back to kind of our little thing here. When we look at my notes, 1, let's get in front and let's define some baselines. I gave you some examples of those. 2, let's identify some target training metrics that we're going to influence. 3, let's quantitatively quantify the financial return. And 4, let's calculate our ROI format. Oh my gosh, I'm not sorry. That Asana pop up just completely threw my brain out and completely distracted me. And these lights are blinding. My whole setup is cattywampus. since my big computer decided to self-emulate or immolate or whatever that word is for setting itself on fire. Step 4, let's calculate the ROI formula. Step 5, let's do our post-training measurement. And then let's go and justify our training. As always, if you have any questions about any of this, if you'd like some help, go to podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/510. Once again, that's podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/510. Thank you all for being here. I really enjoyed teaching you this. I hope this was helpful to you. This, in my opinion, is probably one of the more valuable skills you can have as an operations leader. And hopefully this helps you get some more training for your folks. And I hope you all have an awesome week.